Did you know that there is a profession called kidnapping or kidnappers? Meet the head of the company that makes good money from this, Brian Stern, and who just dragged out from Venezuela the Nobel laureate Maria Corina Machado.
At Graybill Rescue, my team and I have completed 800 missions, saving over 8,400 people. But this is the first person with a Wikipedia page.
Over 800 abductions. He's promoting himself, of course. Yeah. He claims to have successfully carried out operations to free 8,400 people. Do you think this is a special field? Kidnapping people, reuniting families? Some of them were captured by terrorists, bandits, or the government there, and often by the same kind of bandits, just wearing uniforms. It seems that the company is also involved in kidnapping. The boss himself went on this operation, and it was a really high-profile case, considering they were kidnapping Maria Machado, the leader of the Venezuelan opposition, to take her to Oslo for the Nobel Prize ceremony. Quite an operation.
We will learn the details of the dangerous operation to extract Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Corina Machado from Venezuela, where she was hiding on her way to Oslo, Norway.
Maria's family had been taken out of Venezuela earlier, while she herself was hiding from Maduro's trackers. Her photograph was with every police officer at every checkpoint, at the borders, near train stations, and in airports. To get her out, professionals and thorough preparation were needed inside Venezuela, as well as at the place where she was supposed to cross the border. This was handled by Stern and his company, which is called Graybill Rescue. The translation sounds something like Rescue Service of the Gray Bull. Why Gray Bull? I honestly don't know. Stern says that this operation was financed by supporters of Machado, opponents of Maduro, of course, but he doesn't name any names. And he says that the United States government was notified at the last moment. I don't believe it for a second. And gave the green light for the boats to pass through the United States, controlled area in the Caribbean Sea.
Even though we handled hostages, war crime victims, prison escapes, kidnappings, and more. Maria is a well-known name, and that made everything even more special, but also the most difficult. Maria is known as the Iron Lady, and she absolutely lives up to that name. She's a very, very, very determined and tough, just a tough leader and a tough woman. When we were together on the boat, we talked about it. I begged her not to go back. I've been a fan of Maria for years, following her on Twitter. She's my true hero and idol.
Of course, this operation is like a slap in the face to Maduro and his intelligence service. An opposition leader taken out from under the regime's control is always a slap in the face for dictators, and now Maria has serious security. And sending someone with an ice axe, like Stalin did with Trotsky, is something Maduro most likely won't be able to do.
You said that you carried out hundreds of evacuations, rescues, and so on. How was this different from what you did previously?
The mechanics of the operation are never standard, but we had already carried out sea evacuations. We had done operations in restricted areas. We worked behind the front lines in occupied Russia and Ukraine. We worked in Israel, Gaza, Afghanistan, and in all those places. So operations on boats, planes, ground movements under high threat, that's our usual practice at Great Wolf Rescue. However, because of her face, because of her signature, all the Venezuelan intelligence, all the Cuban intelligence, as well as parts of Russian intelligence had been looking for her for months. And especially this week, because of the Nobel Prize, this operation became much riskier than ever before. This is definitely the most complex, high-profile, and delicate operation we've ever done.
I definitely have to imagine if I were a Cuban, Russian, or Venezuelan intelligence officer right now, trying to track her down. I feel like I'm here.
I'm sure they feel that way, and I'm glad they feel that way.
Stern says that the Trump administration was notified right before the start of this operation, as well as the Navy ships that are in the Caribbean Sea. An order has now been given to let both the ship that came from Venezuela and the ship that followed it from the United States pass. I'll allow myself to say that I don't believe this. Not even 99,999%. I'm sure that everyone knew from the very beginning. They prepared it themselves and handed this operation over to private hands, to a private company, simply because if it failed, it wouldn't have been a failure of the United States, but a failure of a private rescue organization. After Maria transferred from the Venezuelan ship to the rescuer's boat, the United States Navy guarded her, escorted her, and then guarded the plane that took her from that very boat. A significant part of the information is kept secret, naturally, for the safety of the participants.
You know, we're fighting these enemies. We're not a commercial veterans organization. We're just patriots doing the right things. We're outside of politics. I don't care about political nonsense. We do the right thing for the right people. And Maria Corina Machado, her values, the way she thinks and fights for her people, completely align with our values and the reasons why we fight for our people. It's not that she's a politician, she's just a leader. I wouldn't even call her a politician. She's really just a leader. Yes, she won the elections and all that, but she is a true patriot of her people who wants justice, equality, freedom, and democracy. And she has been my hero, as I say, for a very long time, when it was the privilege and honor of my career to have the opportunity to save a hero, someone I know, someone I feel like I know, and to share with her a very difficult journey through very dangerous waters and very dangerous circumstances. It's an experience I can't believe actually happened.
Maria was taken out after a year of fear of being discovered. What is she going to do now that she's free? And how could this help our American goal of cleansing Venezuela of drug dealers, including Maduro? Naturally.
So Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Prize laureate Maria Corina Machado has stated that she is ready to become vice president when her country undergoes a democratic transition. She was speaking to journalists in Oslo. Machado received the Nobel Peace Prize. This week, she made it to the Norwegian capital after a daring escape from her home country, where she had been hiding from the Maduro regime. Earlier today, Machado met with the Norwegian royal family and also greeted Pau Mosquera from cable news network Live from Oslo. As I understand it, Pau, you had the opportunity to ask Machado a few questions, especially about the transfer of power, about a peaceful transition if Maduro is overthrown. What did she say?
The Trump administration is already developing plans for the period after Maduro leaves. Where do you see yourself here? Continue?
Well, not only the American government, I think many other governments around the world are preparing for a democratic transition in Venezuela for several reasons. One of them is that they understand that the largest migration crisis in the world today. These are certainly Venezuelans who were forced to flee, and Venezuelans are also preparing to return. So this will affect many countries, including the United States. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of people who will return home, and I will be what the Venezuelan people have already demanded. Won the elections. Our elected president asked me to serve in the government as vice president, our second in command.
Let me remind you that Eduardo Gonzalez, not Maduro, won the 1924 elections. Eduardo was forced to flee Venezuela and is now in Spain. He invited Machado to be his vice president in the government, which he hopes will be formed as a transitional one after Maduro is removed and before the next elections.
So I will accompany him into this new challenging era that is about to begin, or I would say has already begun.
Although at the moment when the transition happens, she expects that both the military and the Venezuelan police will follow the instructions coming from the new authorities. Right now, there are a lot of questions that still have no answers. Because, again, we asked her about her future plans, but she said that for now she wants to rest, spend time with her family and friends, and maybe get a medical checkup. Since during the months she was in hiding, she didn't have time for that. And after that, she might consider meeting with the authorities, but she didn't specify whether it would happen here in Europe or maybe she would go to the United States. So the agenda, the schedule for the coming weeks hasn't been determined yet, and that's something she will decide.
The statement that Machado wants to spend a month with her family, look around, rest, and undergo a medical examination, of course, makes no sense and has nothing to do with reality. But the date is interesting. She said within a month, meaning during the month. Maria assumes, or maybe she knows, that something will happen in Venezuela, with Venezuela, and the active phase of her and Eduard's appearance on the scene will begin, according to the plan, which I suspect was developed either by the Christian Democratic Union or in the White House, and part of which we are already observing in the Caribbean basin. We are watching it every minute.
The United States is increasing pressure on Venezuela even more, announcing new sanctions against shipping companies and vessels that, according to the administration, help transport Venezuelan oil. This happened after the United States seized an oil tanker under sanctions, which, according to the administration, was carrying millions of dollars worth of oil off the coast of Venezuela.
Are you going to seize more Venezuelan oil assets? Another tanker again?
No, I'm not going to tell you that. I mean, it wouldn't be very smart of me to tell you that. We are destroying drugs on a scale that no one has ever seen before. Every boat taken down saves 25,000 American lives. But we intercepted about 96% of the drugs coming in by water, and now we're starting on land, and it's much easier on land.
Good morning, Charlie. Glad to see you. You're absolutely right. We all know that sanctions without enforcement are meaningless. You can write it down or issue a decree, but if you're not ready to do the hard work of stopping the flow, it won't matter. Whether it's drugs, oil, or other sanctioned items, it doesn't make much sense. I think President Trump is showing that it can be done, and done with tactical skill. It was interesting to see that, and importantly, I think he's trying to put economic pressure on the regime. So if you start to remove it, I think there was just under 1 million barrels of crude oil on the tanker. Do the math. Maduro will soon run out of money and won't be able to pay the thugs ruining Venezuelans' lives and endangering America. If you do this on such a scale, you'll be able to put pressure on the regime fairly quickly, which will give the Venezuelan people a chance to change the government they live under. That was Mike Pompeo, former member of Congress, then CIA director, then Secretary of State during Trump 45. We have a pretty good idea where those ships are. They turn off their transponders, but you know, it's hard to hide from what's in the sky. We have a pretty good idea where they are, and we understand very well where they're coming from and where they're headed. Some of these shipments would go to China, and they could buy cheap crude oil, not at $55 a barrel like Americans pay, but at $20 or $25, so they get cheap energy. That's something we must not allow. They are under sanctions and must stop supplying crude oil to the enemies.
Do you feel how the scope of the operation is expanding because of the sanctions on Russia? Iran? The oil that the United Nations declared unsanctioned can be bought for, well, instead of $50 a barrel like we pay, for half that price. So those who compete with our goods can, if they buy unsanctioned oil. Well, before there was no danger at all, but now it seems there is. They pay half as much as we do, and thus reduce the cost of their goods. In other words, they increase the competitiveness of their products, which naturally doesn't please those who act according to the agreements and end up looking like fools. We act honestly, which means they cheat, and that's why they win. And what are we supposed to do about it? So just keep quiet, or maybe lift the sanctions or catch and punish the violators, which is something we absolutely must not do. That's like announcing the rules, declaring a ban, and then doing nothing when those rules are broken. As they say, once you've said A, you can't complain about the consequences. As they say, the deeper into the woods you go, the more you focus on your own interests.
Hi, Jakey. I just got back from an on-the-record briefing with a leading member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator Mark Warner spoke with a group of military analysts at George Washington University. I directly asked him if the United States plans to go to war with Venezuela. Senator Warner is a member of the Gang of Eight, and he said, I don't know. It's alarming how many aircraft, troops, and ships are now in the Caribbean Sea. The aircraft carrier Gerald Erford is moving further south into the Caribbean basin. It has 18 Growlers electronic warfare aircraft in Puerto Rico for suppressing enemy radars and destroying air defense systems. HH-60 Air Force search and rescue helicopters redeployed to the Caribbean basin from Japan, and 12 Navy warships.
An operation against Venezuela. Is it still just about drugs, or is it now also about oil?
It's connected to many things.
It will soon begin on land, heading toward a United States port.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin once again confirms his support for Maduro's Venezuela. So, what lies ahead for us? Will there be a prolonged war in Venezuela, where the Russians and Chinese will be supplying weapons, a mirror repeat of Ukraine? How will other Latin American countries behave? Will Trump succeed with a special 3-day operation that Putin couldn't pull off? Or will bribing Venezuelan generals work? Russia allocated about $2 billion to bribe Ukrainian military personnel. But it seems that those who were supposed to deliver the money to potential traitors of the Ukrainian homeland stole it along the way. We don't know whether the Americans will steal what is supposed to be given to those who are supposed to stab Maduro in the back. Of course, there are more questions than answers, but let's hope that the CIA works better than the Federal Security Service and main intelligence directorate, that American soldiers ride in working armored vehicles, and that American Marines are not starving the way Russian infantrymen are, and that the son of Farmer Isaiah won't be ripping a toilet out of a nest in Venezuela to send it to his mother.
As you said, Cornell, this is a dramatic escalation of confrontation with the Maduro regime in Venezuela and the largest tanker we've ever seized. It's not clear yet what his nationality is. We're trying to find out, and we'll know soon, I'm sure. I was surprised that the market didn't experience a bit of a disruption at the end when it became clear that everything happening in Venezuela with the destruction of drug traffickers and so on, as the president said, that's not all yet. I have no doubt that this is the beginning of something, Connell, not the end.
The beginning of what? Oil is about 60, so nothing major yet. Stocks seem focused on the Fed today, but the beginning of what?
Oil is the beginning, I think, of a gradual military intervention aimed at overthrowing the Maduro regime. I'm sure that an integral part of everything the president does will be an attempt to ensure safe passage for the Venezuelan dictator to some other country except ours. Who will take him in? Maybe someone in Switzerland or another country in Europe or Latin America. He might not agree to go to another Latin American country. I remember how Somoza, the dictator of Nicaragua, agreed to go to Paraguay and he was killed there. I think that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing the beginning of the presence of American armed forces on the ground. It's not exactly on land, but it was a tanker not far from the shore. They captured it, they took it. The president says that we will keep the oil. Well, that's it. You can't oppose Maduro more openly than the president did. The only thing left from this point is some kind of ground operation, like a seizure, the capture of an oil refinery, let's say, or something like that. But the news is that the tanker has been seized. We don't usually seize tankers, so this is a big deal. Konal.
If you're right about what's next in all this, Gerald, will he go to Congress for authorization for this? I can't imagine that he will, knowing President Trump.
Well, I think you've summed it all up. Knowing President Trump, here's the key phrase here. I don't think this president or this administration believes it's necessary to go to Congress to fight drug traffickers. It seems to me that they have this quasi-law enforcement military approach to this problem. Americans are dying, so we have to do something to protect our citizens. We have to fight with deadly force or fight deadly drugs with deadly force. I think there's also an understanding that we have a government in exile in Venezuela. Well, Maduro lost the presidential election. He's a dictator clinging to power unconstitutionally.
Our arguments. Well, I'm not a lawyer, am I? And drugs are being brought into our country, and our people are dying from it. We can't stop it in any way. The only way to stop it is to go to the place where they're produced and where they're coming from. B. So about 1 million people came to us from Venezuela, ladies and gentlemen, and we are spending huge amounts of money on them. In Venezuela, well, as Trump says, they dump their prisons and mental institutions on us. That's how they got under our skin. And now, so how else do we justify our actions? So, Maduro lost the election, so he's holding on to power by force, which actually isn't our business, right? D. So Maduro is cooperating with our global adversaries, with Russia and China, but that's not really our business either. But we can't allow China and Russia to turn Venezuela into their military base. Well, that's basically all for today, and tomorrow we might find ourselves in Caracas. So now, accordingly, we certainly don't know what will happen tomorrow, but we do know what will happen the day after tomorrow. Maduro won't be there. Venezuela will have new leadership. And I think before we leave there, because we will go there, yes, will we go in by military means or will we go in? Because as a result, the new government came to an empty place and invited us. We will go in there and comb through the whole country, and we won't leave not a single laboratory, not a single person who took part in making, distributing, or transporting drugs to us. Well, and accordingly, we will immediately send 1 million Venezuelans back home, and another 5 million will come from mainly two countries, Peru and Colombia, where they are now. And I think that both Venezuela and almost all other Latin American countries will immediately calm down, and everyone will be in an incredibly good mood because it's Venezuela and not them. And the Colombian president will start scratching various places on his body. One of them is called the head, and he'll be thinking maybe he should also go relax on some distant island somewhere, let's say in the icy oceans. That's all. Goodbye.